Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell Podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. We are pleased to be joined and honored to be joined by the one, the only Brett Griffin, of course, who is a spotter as well as one of the co-hosts of the Door Bumper Clear podcast on Dirty Mo Media. How's it going, man?
Good, Casey. What's up? How you been?
I have been good. What an interesting race we had this week with the Bristol Dirt Race. I was talking to a few people about this, and it's like it's going to be the most controversial race. It's either you like it or you absolutely cannot stand it. Where do you think? Where do you stand on that? And it's like, I don't even know where to go with that.
Yeah, I tell you, Casey, had I been a competitor in that race, I would have been very frustrated because if you look back at how the weekend started, the very first attempt to go out there and have a competitive heat race was absolutely almost borderline dangerous because when we went green in the Truck Series heat race, those guys couldn't see. Their radiators immediately filled up with mud. Their windshields filled up with mud. So that really left me nervous going into the rest of the weekend's events in terms of how knowledgeable are we about preparing this racetrack? How knowledgeable are we about knowing when and when we shouldn't do what? Because it was very obvious the track was too muddy, which means it wasn't ready. And it was very obvious we didn't know it wasn't ready, and we left pit road anyway, right? So I was very concerned. That made me nervous as a competitor, right? I was super excited, though, backing up going to the weekend. I was the most excited about the Cup heat races out of anything on the schedule because 10 cars out there for a short race is what dirt tracks are all about. You got a limited amount of time to make a lot of things happen. And if you do so, you get rewarded with a high starting position. And if you start from the pole and you win the race, you obviously get 10 points, gives you a chance to still end up with a good position. So, man, that's the thing I was most disappointed about from a viewing perspective, right? Is we didn't get an opportunity to do that. And then I guess backing up, and we couldn't control this because of Mother Nature, but a lot of people were talking about it. I mean, Clint and I were talking about it after the race. I mean, Chipper Jones has never sent Clint Boyer a message on Twitter, and he sent him a message on Twitter. We had a lot of people excited about us trying something new. So I'm really hate that Mother Nature didn't let us do that on Sunday when we would have had a very large audience versus doing it on Monday when everybody was ultimately at work. But to fast forward to the races, I thought the truck race was pretty good. I was a little surprised the dirt guys couldn't make up a difference in necessary. They were in subpar equipment, but nonetheless, I thought their talent level would bring them up and make them somewhat relevant in that race. Never happened. Mark Truex obviously dominated. I think Mother Nature did us a huge favor by dumping that much rain because when the truck race started, it was fine. When the Cup race started, it was fine. By the end of stage one, after running that many laps, during the day, which is key, nobody else does that in dirt track racing, running that many laps with that many vehicles, 36 vehicles out there, I think the track was deteriorating rapidly, and I think NASCAR / Bristol Motor Speedway didn't know what to do about it. And I think in hindsight, when they had their Tuesday meetings and they recapped everything that went on over the weekend, I think they probably realized 3 minutes to prep the track to get it ready for the next 50-lap run was nowhere near enough time. And as we saw them keep rushing that 3-minute thing along, the track was getting so dusty and so bad, the competitors couldn't see. That's why they went to single file restarts. The fans at home on TV watching, I couldn't see. Spotters couldn't see. And it does us no good to have a show out there that people can't see. So, but again, as a fan, I would rate this as an A+. Had I been on the competition side and not won the race or not had a really good run, been in the top 6 all day, I think I'd be pretty dang frustrated.
Yeah. So, I mean, were you it was announced that the dirt race is coming back. And I think the reaction from that was a little surprising from a lot of people. What is it surprising? I'm not surprised that it is coming back, but I'm really surprised that it got the reaction that it did.
Well, I'd ask anybody this. If you watched that race, would you watch it again? And I think most people would say yes. And I think if we, went around the grandstands and said, hey, would you come back for this? I think most people would say yes. Marcus Smith is not afraid to throw a Hail Mary. I mean, when you look at what he did to the Charlotte Roval, I think he did a phenomenal job. I think he's got a really good racetrack that he's built inside of Charlotte Motor Speedway for that Roval. And when you look at him going to what he's doing in Nashville right now with the fairgrounds, when you look at what he's done with Bristol Dirt, I think if you look at the ownership in NASCAR right now. Look, there's two big players. It's Marcus Smith's group, SMI, and it's NASCAR themselves. And then we obviously got a few independents here and there with Dover playing with Nashville, right? Pocono's up there on its own. Indianapolis is on its own. But as a whole, I think Marcus has shown he's got really big balls and he's not afraid to try new things. He also ain't going to give up that date at Bristol Motor Speedway. So if Fox wanted to put dirt on the racetrack, he did it. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for everything to get better. I just hope that all sides come together to do that. I hope that TV will bend and say, hey, you can run this at night. We understand why now. The drivers couldn't see because of the glare from the sun and the dirt and all the things that we saw at home. I can tell you this, Casey, when you're watching this stuff on TV, if it looks like it's raining hard on TV, it's raining 10 times harder in person. If it looks dusty on TV, it's 10 times more dusty in person. So when I saw that glare, when I saw that dust, I was like, "Ooh, these guys are having a tough time." And then you finally started hearing Clint. And Clint did a phenomenal job of breaking down that broadcast. You know, his passion for dirt was blowing through the screen to our TV audience. He had a lot of knowledge. And I thought he did an awesome job of really just breaking down, almost like a Tony Romo-esque analysis during the race. And I don't listen to a lot of the commentary on TV because I'll be honest with you, man, it drives me nuts because some of it's used to fill content. Some of it's used to explain simple things that quite honestly, I just don't want to hear. But I knew in this race, there would be things that I wouldn't know and things that I would want to hear. So man, I had the volume on 10 all day. Had it cranked up. And when they announced they were coming back, I was like, you know what? I hope we can come back. I hope that, again, all three sides will give a little bit, right? The track realizes we got to do things better to prep it. NASCAR realizes there's things we got to do better from a communication standpoint and organizing the event. And then ultimately TV's got to bend and say, hey, we'll run this Saturday night instead of Sunday afternoon. Because Sunday night programming gets weird. And I get that TV's got stuff laid out for months and months and years in advance a lot of times. But I think if we can all pull together and get a good weather weekend, I think this could be something special, man. I was concerned for the driver's safety when they took that first green flag. And I was like, man, we can't do this all weekend. And we saw how much, we had 2.5 inches of rain was coming. We knew it. I was like, that rain's not even here yet. So if it's already this muddy, how are we going to do this? Well, they miraculously figured it out. And again, as a fan, I'd give them an A+.
Yeah. There was something interesting that came out yesterday with NASCAR and testing rain tires on the short track. People have said for years rain is, obviously, delayed races and stuff. And people say, well, why don't you just put on rain tires and race? What is your thoughts on that with with their testing out at these short tracks and stuff? What's that going to be like if that actually goes through?
Casey, I think we answered our own question. I mean, when we went to the Roval last year, we watched AJ Allmendinger run around there on the banking in turns 1 and 2, on the banking in turns 3 and 4, in a stock car, going fast, sideways, ripping it, rooster tail coming out of the right rear. If you can do it, then you can do it, right? If you can actually put on a rain tire that allows you to go around the racetrack in the torrential rain that we saw those guys race in, they were hitting freaking standing water, 2-3 inches deep and still not wrecking, right? So, I mean, minus Chase Briscoe screwing up on that last restart where he should have took the top instead of the bottom. Yeah. But when you look at that, to me, that says, hey, it's your job as a race car driver to go as fast as you can go, given the equipment that you're in, and not wreck. And we saw those guys be able to do that. And if it's the same level playing field for everybody, I don't know who could complain. So if we can go to, I'm almost opposite though of what NASCAR's thinking here, because the banking helps hold the car up, right? We're looking at doing it at flatter tracks where there's nothing to help with that lateral grip. So we're leaving it all up to now that tire to be able to hold them up. So, but again, I think we answered our own question. We know those guys can go around the Roval in a stock car at a speed. Now, I don't know what top speed is, but let the driver decide that. If he knows he can't go 150, then go 140 and put us on a hell of a show. Once again, I think it's a really good thing they're trying this.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting before. So, you kind of touched on this last week when you had one of the most interesting episodes you had with Door Bumper Clear was a couple of weeks ago when you had Mike Joy on. What was that like? And kind of addressing some of the comments that he made about funded drivers and stuff. What was that like to have Mike on?
I think I think people have this misconception of me that like I'm willing to, say things in a forum and not back up what I'm willing to say face to face or, on a Zoom or whatever we can do these days. I mean, it's hard to have anything face to face in 2021, right? I grew up in a really small town, man. If you had problems, guess what? Your problem was in school with you the next day. Your problem was at Food Line when you went grocery shopping. Like, we just handled things. So I think Mike Joy said what he said because of Noah Gragson, as did my co-host Freddie Kraft and TJ Majors. Mike said he didn't. The best thing to do is offer him an opportunity to come on our show and explain himself. And as I introduced Mike last week, he's one of the most distinguished guys probably in motorsports all over the world. Mike Joy is an awesome person, awesome personality, and we owed him the opportunity to come on and explain himself. And no different than what I did with Corey LaJoy yesterday. I don't think Jason was able to get Corey scheduled, but hey, come to my house, come on my show, call me, text me, whatever you want to do to clear the air. But I think that's what's cool, man, is we can all have different opinions. We can express them, and we can man up about them. You're not going to see me say something and then go run and hide and act like I didn't say. People on Twitter think that I need their help forming my own opinion. I promise you, I'm an opinionated guy. I don't need your help. I certainly value solid debate, but then people try to take it, one way or the other. But it is what it is, man. I actually, when I get those tweets, I think it's funny. I think it's funny to engage with them. And if people who know me know that I'm laughing as I'm engaging them, and some of the other people are like, oh, it worked, I got him mad. No, dude, you didn't make me mad. But no, man, having Mike Joy on was a joy. And thank you for the good feedback. I had a lot of people, including Mike Davis, say that was one of our better shows. So, but again, man, when you have a guy that caliber on, you're going to have a good show. When you have a guy like Marty Smith on yesterday, it's going to be a good show, right? I mean, when you have a big name on, like we've been fortunate, man. I mean, we've pretty much brought in all the people we've ever wanted to bring in. If it was Jenna Fryer on a week that she said something controversial about DW retiring, we were able to land her. Like, we don't have this guest list that we're sitting on in January and we say, hey, let's go get these people. I text Marty Smith the night before the show and said, man, we just ran a dirt track. You and I are just rednecks from, the Southeast. I want to get you on here and talk about how you thought it went. And that was a last minute thing. Believe it or not, Blake reached out to me, Blake Shelton, and said, I want to come on your podcast because there's some things I want to talk about NASCAR that are getting on my nerves. And I was like, awesome. I mean, I didn't even have to ask Blake Shelton to come on our show, right? So when you look at some of those things from a guest perspective, it's usually a last minute deal, or like when Bubba, he was in the middle of his thing. And I told Freddie, I said, hey, let's get Bubba on here. And he said, well, why don't we wait till he announces? And I said, when he announces what he's doing, everybody and their brother is going to get him, and we're going to be left in the dust. We're not going to have anything special to talk to him about. Let's get him before it's announced. And then obviously the Michael Jordan thing was in play that we kind of broke. We were having fun with. I asked Bubba point blank, have you talked to Michael Jordan before? And he's like, no. And then he's looking at me like, dude, you shouldn't have asked me that. Like, so for me, it's just, man, how about having fun? And I think we're not really, I mean, we've got this media outlet, Dirty Mo Media, but the three of us are inside guys just shooting the crap and giving our perspective. And I could tell you, it's rare I agree with anything TJ says. Probably 50% of the time I agree with what Freddie says, and I don't think either one of them ever agree with me. So it's a fun dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. So we're the off week this week. We're heading to Martinsville, Richmond, Kansas, Talladega. You got some of the tracks that a lot of fans would know. What are we going to expect, for the next few weeks? What's it going to be like? Because we've had 7 different winners. With many say we could get up to 16, and we've never had that before in this format. So what's that going to be like the next few weeks?
Well, I mean, you obviously hit on a couple points there. What's the schedule going to be like, man? And I got to say, looking back, every single race that we've put on television has been phenomenal for our fans, except for Atlanta. Atlanta was a snooze fest from my couch. Now, had I been spotting that race, it would not have felt that way, because that is a fun racetrack to be at. The experience at the track and the experience watching on TV, they're always going to be different. That's the beauty of racing. That's why I tell people all the time, go to the racetrack. Like, if we're going to watch a football game, we know damn good and well that we can see the game better sitting on our couch than we can sitting on the 18th row in a football stadium. At a racetrack, that's not the case. The better experience is always having your butt on that metal grandstand, vibrating from that horsepower with a cold beer in your hand. That's the way I'm going to do it, right? But the tracks that are coming up, look, like you said, man, we got a lot of good ones. We got Talladega, we got Martinsville. Anything can happen at those two places. Then we're going to a story track in Darlington. Dover is a phenomenal racetrack where Goodyear's taken a really crappy tire the last few years, but last year's Dover was a lot better than the prior two races that we have been there. That's why Dover, in my mind, probably end up losing that race or moving that race rather to Nashville. What a fun market. I'm actually a part of a big promotion right now that we're doing for Nutrient Solutions in that Nashville market, man. We're activating on Broadway. We've never had that opportunity to go downtown Broadway and do big activations and then take the party 30 miles away to Lebanon, Tennessee to the racetrack. So I think a lot of really good things coming up heading into the summer. I think what you really got to watch, though, is the point situation. I don't think we see 16 different drivers because we're starting to go to some of those tracks where, you're going to see guys like Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch. I don't know that anybody will ever beat Kyle Larson again at Dover. I mean, he's just that good, and he's not in average equipment anymore. He's in great equipment. And to me, if we're looking at this season so far, who's had the most speed at every single track, hands down, is Kyle Larson. That guy could have won, should have won a road course. He wrecked, did win, a race shortly after that, and has just been fast. I mean, the dirt track, he's ripping. He drives from last to sixth in what felt like 35 laps. What I think you really got to pay attention to is the panic button outside of that top 20 in points. And I was looking the other night, and it's big teams, man. I mean, Stuart Haas has 3 out of 4 teams outside of the top 20. That's hard to stomach. It's hard to even understand why, knowing what those guys have for resources, what they have for talent, what they have for budgets. But when you're looking at Eric Amarola, Cole Custer, and Chase Briscoe, right now, they're nowhere near in playoff contention. And if that's hard to believe, right? You're looking at Ross Chastain, who came in and got in a car that certainly made the playoffs a lot when Kyle Larson was driving it, certainly contended to win races. One year they won 4 races. He's sitting outside of the top 25 in points. So to me, man, that's kind of where I think the storylines come from is those guys are going to have to throw Hail Marys in these races. They're going to have to stay out on old tires to try and get more stage points. They're going to have to take 2 when everybody else takes 4. They're not going to be able to keep doing what everybody else is doing because, let's be honest, their cars aren't that fast. And then on top of not having cars that are that fast, they're making mistakes. So they could be sitting 17th, 18th in points if they're not wrecking. Instead, Eric Amarola's back there dang near 28th in points, barely, ahead of guys like Corey LaJoie, right? Who does not have the funding and the resources that they've got. So I think that's for me what I'm going to watch as the summer plays out is how much ground can those guys make up? Because they're going to have to hit the panic button. They've only got 19 races. Those first few races, you can make big jumps or big losses in the points. Now that you got 7 races under you, and that next race is Martinsville, guess what? Anything can happen. Next one after that, Talladega. Holy cow, the big one, right? You got to deal with that. So now you're sitting on race 10. Well, the law of averages starts playing against you, man. So I think we've seen who the fastest cars are, and I think we've seen who the fastest drivers are. Yes, we've had 7 different winners. But at the end of the day, I think if you said that playoffs start tomorrow, I think Larson's your favorite.
Yeah, of course. All right, Brett, thank you so much for taking some time. Let's have you on again sometime, and we'll maybe see you at the racetrack one day.
Take care, man. Have a great Easter. And hey, thanks everybody that's been watching and listening to these shows, man, because I think that the more things like what Casey's doing here just gives our fan base more and more content, different perspective. And I will say this, man, Fox, they tagged this the best season ever. So far, they're right.
Yeah,